This knife is weirdly controversial. But why? Well, every once in a while, something massive comes along that defines a clear shift in the world. From life-saving inventions to weapons of destruction, points throughout our history are usually categorized as coming before or after specific moments. The invention of the wheel, the creation of the printing press, or by far the most pivotal and important moment of all, the birth of the first Brandon clones. All of these mark instances in which the world was changed forever. This happens on a smaller scale as well. Within the balisong hobby, there have been a number of key moments that pushed our community forward, but few have been quite as impactful as the Krake Raken. Its release in 2019 marked a turning point in the history of butterfly knives whose ramifications are still affecting the hobby today. The simple idea of a live blade sandwiched between two aluminum channel handles seems like a given now, but it had never been achieved with such competency before this. In just 4 short years, the Krake Raken has risen to be one of the most beloved balisongs of all time. Unfortunately, people don't always appreciate when you change something that they love. This year, Squid Industries released this, a titanium version of the Krake Raken that was intended to be a high-end successor to the line. In so doing, they accidentally created one of the largest controversies I have seen in this hobby in quite some time. Nobody can seem to agree on almost anything when it comes to the Thai Kraken. Some people think the design is too plain, while others say it's better than the original. I've heard complaints about it lacking overall grip, and I've heard people saying that it's one of the most comfortable feeling things in the hand. The flipping has been absolutely lampooned by some, while at the same time being called the best flipping Kraken by others. I have never seen a more clearly divided set of opinions on almost anything, much less a simple knife. In this video, I wanted to take a deeper look at this thing and discover what it is exactly that makes it so controversial. Along the way, we can also figure out what audience it was actually intended for and whether or not it's worth buying. Because, spoilers, it costs just north of $400, which is a lot of money to spend on one knife. But of course, balisongs in general are just kind of expensive, which is unfortunate because we've made this entire channel around the idea of reviewing them. So if you enjoy these kinds of videos and want to see more in the future, make sure you're subscribed to get notifications when we release new stuff. And if you're already a subscriber, perhaps consider supporting us on Patreon, please? Pretty please? Woo. Tiers start at just $3 a month, and patrons get early access to videos like these days in advance of the public. We also have a private community Discord server, only accessible to patrons, where you can talk to both Brandon and I directly, and we post behind the scenes content there when we can. Our channel is directly supported by viewers like you, so thank you. Now to begin, I think we should take a look at what made the original Kraken so special so that we can understand the Thai Kraken a little bit better. A simple idea executed incredibly well. That is what the Krake Raken really is. There's no fancy gimmicks, no tricks or crazy features. Instead, the Krake Raken shines because of its simplicity. With 2 aluminum channel handles, Squid crafted the base of what would come to be known as the standard of flipping performance. It was neutral and light, reacting fast to the slightest movement of the fingers, and coincided with major advancements in the way flipping was done in the first place. The art form evolved right alongside the release of the Krake Raken, and with that, so too did the market. Tons of balisongs since its release take design cues from the Kraken.
Just like me!
What? Oh. Basically every good channel aluminum live blade and trainer in existence can trace its inspiration back to something that Squid created. It has become the de facto standard in the balisong community for both flipping and construction. Even so, people have actually been asking for a titanium version for a long time. This is nothing new. Hobbyists have wanted format changes between balisongs as long as they've been in existence. But the challenge that the Kraken presented was different. For Squid, the question of how to go about changing their most beloved entry to their lineup was no easy task. First of all, they had to learn to work with titanium in the first place, which they did when creating the Tsunami. This balisong, by the way, is the one I flipped the most out of my entire collection. I actually made a whole video exploring that topic previously, which you can watch right here if you'd like. After they got a handle on this new material, pun intended, next up was deciding exactly how to go about changing from aluminum to titanium. The easiest way to see this thought process, I think, is to talk about the specs. There are different challenges that arise when moving between different materials, such as density. Titanium is heavier than aluminum, and so doing something as simple as just milling the same exact handles out of titanium doesn't work. This is pretty much exactly what Machine-Wise did with their titanium Sasori, with the original Sasori being made out of aluminum. They did add a speed channel here, but this near one-to-one conversion led to a very different flipping experience between the two, with the titanium model feeling much heavier than the aluminum one. Reviews of this and the Machine-Wise Totori coming soon. The way they solved this weight issue also speaks volumes about their intention when creating this thing. They decided to go with a complete overhaul in format.
Like this?
The fuck is that?
I'll never tell.
The original has channel design handles milled from a single piece of aluminum, but this new version is sandwich, made from two separate slabs of titanium. Already, this shows that Squid had decided to go for something completely different instead of simply rehashing the original design. The titanium Kraken is more inspired by its predecessor rather than being directly based on it. The other changes are minute, but do add up when taken together. The weight of the Thai Kraken is actually lighter than the original at 4.19 ounces compared to 4.31. This disparity in weight is instantly noticeable when you pick it up. They also decided to change the hardware completely, going with custom-made flat titanium screws that really add to the overall aesthetic, but do tend to strip easier than just steel screws. In terms of design, it is actually relatively plain. It takes inspiration from the original by following this motif of a line with circles drawn through it, but it fully cuts this pattern through into holes. The faces of the titanium are barren, lacking the texture milling from the aluminum version. This choice is one of the big ones I've heard a lot about when researching the controversy. Some people miss the old texturing, while others really enjoy the nice, smooth feeling of the flat titanium. For me, this balisong seems like an absolute dream when it comes to modding specifically. These wide open titanium faces are like a canvas for anodization, and I love what I've seen from the modding community. Another controversial choice seems to be the implementation of a modular weight system. Instead of going with standard spacers like most sandwich balisongs, they decided to use aluminum pins as the spacers. The idea here is that by removing these pins, you can change the weight distribution of the handles. There are multiple problems with this system. Number one is the choice of material. Because the pins are made of aluminum, each pin only weighs 0.006 ounces, which is 6/1000ths of an ounce. That means that any adjustment you make will be extremely subtle, but that's not necessarily a good thing. The weight can only really decrease. There simply aren't enough pins to add a significant amount of weight to the already light handles, so your only real choice is to remove pins to go lighter. I will say that I actually did like the way it flipped with only half of these pins in. It was kind of interesting, but it wasn't necessarily good by any means. Number two is spacing. Standard spacers are just a single piece with the thickness precisely controlled. By using pins, you add much more complexity to this system. It is way harder to control the thickness of 10 individual parts than it is to just do it well one time. This leads to a very small disparity between the thickness of the bushing in the blade and the thickness at the end of the handles. The handles not being perfectly parallel can have an effect on tuning, which normal spacers would have solved. A way Squid could have solved this problem is by adding a bushing into the hardware at the end of the handles, which is exactly what Zippy Balisong did for his spacer mods on the Thai Kraken. Unfortunately, there isn't actually space to add a proper bushing into the design, so you have to remove at least 3 of the pins to get it to fit, which lowers the overall weight even more. Calling this a modular weight system just feels like a bit of a stretch, in my opinion. While I do like the aesthetic the pin spacers bring to the design, I really think a different approach would have benefited this knife a lot. They did, thankfully, stop using red Loctite on the screws that give you access to the modular weight system, which thank Christ for that, but unfortunately you do have to remove both the top screw and the bottom screw to actually get that done, so it's only a slight win. From a design perspective, personally, I actually really do like the look of the Krake Raken. It reminds me of the original while being extremely unique in its own right. The choices they made when adapting it are pretty extreme departures from what many would have expected, so I can understand why some are turned off by it, but overall, I do think the design serves its intended purpose well and looks good with all 4 of the available blade shapes, including the trainer. However, aesthetics matter a lot less if functionality is sacrificed because of them. So let's move on to the other most controversial aspect of this balisong, the flipping.
Controversy, Yahoo!
The way this thing flips is weird. The decision to remove the blade entirely is extremely questionable, but I think what the fuck, Brandon? Stop editing my scripts and turning everything into fun chucks.
You'll never stop me!
Oh. To be clear, I actually like the way the normal Krake Raken flips a lot, but community feedback tells me that this is not necessarily a universal experience. The original Kraken was a bombshell for the flipping community due to its extremely neutral profile, making it good for almost every style of flipping. It could do just about anything you wanted without too much effort and didn't have any major weaknesses. I like to think of this pleasing type of balance as an everyman factor because pretty much everyone likes it to some degree. The thing that the titanium version is lacking is this level of approachability. The balance profile of the Krake Raken is different from the original, and not in a way that everybody likes. Because of its lightness and distribution, it tends to carry less momentum overall, which can make some tricks harder to pull off. This is especially true with one of the newest innovations in flipping styles, known as tech. The flippers I've heard complain the most about the balance of the Krake Raken are some of the best flippers I know. They are incredibly good at technical and intricate flipping that blows my mind. It can be said that their disavowment of this balisong is pretty damaging, but I think that might be overlooking something. While their skill does certainly bolster their ability to review this knife, textile flipping is a very specific and niche part of the hobby, at least right now. The reason this is important is that tech tricks often favor extremely neutral balances.
You mean like this?
No.
You're lost.
Oh. Intricate tech tricks often revolve around very small changes in momentum or continuing movement through complex and unorthodox rollovers. Alongside this, tech is a new and growing category of tricks with a style that is hard to pin down and define exactly. This massive growth in one particular style is led primarily by people creating new and unique tricks to pad out their own arsenal, creating a very personal touch to each tech flipper's flow. Because of this, tech flippers themselves tend to favor a very specific type of knife and balance. This isn't a bad thing by any means, but it does show that the scope of what they might consider to be a high-performance balisong is relatively narrow. Brandon and I have actually found the titanium Krake Raken to be a very comfortable flipper. It fits our preferences well, even though it lacks some of the end weight, and I haven't had any issues with the reduction in momentum carrying, even when performing pretty intricate tricks. It feels light and nimble in my hands, and the titanium, though lacking the texture of the original, feels even more grippy somehow. It listens to basically everything I ask it to do, and even changing between the various blades didn't have that big of an effect on my enjoyment of it. Though I will admit I am a big fan of this new Weehawk blade design. I will say that the trainer blade does flip the best out of the bunch, but it is by a very small margin in my opinion. They all perform about the same. One aspect I've not been too keen on is the change in handle thickness. The aluminum Krake Raken is 0.5 inches thick, but the titanium version reduces this to 0.475. Now, this is only 1/40th of an inch in difference, but it does mean that the Krake Raken is ever so slightly less square than the original, and that does have a very slight effect on fanning performance. Similarly, the reduction in handle weight has had a minute effect on chaplains, making them slightly less sticky than the original, but not by much. Well, I do think it has its issues. Overall, I find it to be a very competent flipper. Performance-wise, the Krake Raken falls falls somewhere under stuff like the Tsunami and the Titanium Wraith, but above the BB Superfly in my opinion. It doesn't dethrone mainstays in my collection like the Seraph or the Invictus, but it's still fantastic in its own right. Tricks like aerials, parabolics, ladders, scissors, and the giraffe all feel good to me. In my opinion, for most flipping, this knife performs very well. It just lacks that everyman factor that the original had. But I think that's kind of a good thing. So let's actually break down this controversy and see what's going on. Originally, I was confused when I heard all of the conflicting viewpoints about the titanium Krake Raken, especially with how extreme they often are. I have heard equally someone absolutely bashing this knife while someone else sings its praises as the best around. At its core, the reason for this controversy seems to be that the Thai Kraken is just so fundamentally different from the original. All of the core points I've heard people both lamenting and praising equally are things that set this version apart from its aluminum counterpart. The main issue is just that. This isn't really a Krake Raken. To some, that's a curse. Many people wanted a faithful adaptation of the original thing that they loved into a new format. But for others, it's a blessing, bringing about a whole new experience that they're glad to have. The core of what makes this balisong so controversial is also the reason I like it so much. In all honesty, I don't want more balisongs that fulfill the bare minimum of what a good neutral flipper is. I've always been a person who appreciates differences and diversity, and this is especially true when it comes to the knives in my collection. I mean, I created this balisong Pride hoodie design for a reason. I believe differences between butterfly knives is what makes them special, and a collection of all of the same thing just isn't something I'm interested in. To me, the Thai Kraken feels like some weird middle ground between the original aluminum version and the Tsunami, and I like how it flips a lot, but I wouldn't call it an authentic Krake Raken experience. When it comes to the question of who this was made for, I have a relatively simple answer. If you like lighter knives that are moddable and made from titanium, then this knife could be for you. However, if you want an experience similar to the one that you love and are familiar with, this likely won't be what you're looking for. But if you still want a solid titanium balisong, thankfully there are a lot more options than there used to be. The machine-wise Totori and Sasori have their issues, but I think there's a lot to love about them. BB Barfly has the BB Superfly, which is very similar construction to this, but has a way easier to modify weight system that actually meaningfully affects the balance and costs well under $300 versus this being over $400. Check out Brandon's review here for more info on that thing. Earlier this year, I called the titanium version of the EPS Wraith a perfect balisong, and I still believe that. Squid Industries also has a lot of titanium options now too. The Hydro is a weirdly short but solid offering that's very different from the rest of their lineup. The Tsunami is obviously fantastic, and the only channel titanium balisong they make, the Madco, is pretty great too. Of course, if you don't want anything made of titanium and way cheaper, there is the Squiddy WH. It's the best flipping version of the Squiddy and our first collaboration with Squid Industries on a product. I bring mine pretty much everywhere when I can't have a metal balisong, from places like the airport to even concerts and raves. As a matter of fact, if you already own a Squiddy WH, where is the weirdest place you've brought it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Squid created quite a stir in the community with the release of this thing, but I'm honestly glad that they did. Unfortunately, it's not the format change that some people wanted, but to me, it works extremely well as more of a spiritual successor to the original. I really like this new spot in their lineup, and if you have the money to spend on it, I do think it's well worth the price as a unique addition to any collection. Just maybe see if you can try flipping one before you buy it. And let's be real, no matter what you think of this, the titanium Krake Raken is leagues better in almost every measurable category compared to certain balisongs.
Woo, that was cool. Yeah. You got so much better at flipping. Oh my God, no!
I want to give a big thank you to Squid Industries for sending out these review units. I will honestly be quite sad to see them go. If you are weird like me and would like to buy your own Krake Raken like I will be doing after this review, consider using our affiliate link at squid.willhirsch.gay. You can get a discount on any of their products and help support our channel at the same time. With that said, I do want to make it clear that neither Squid nor any maker has ever had editorial control over our review process. We will request review units, but makers never get any access to scripts or approval over the final video. All thoughts expressed are exclusively my own real opinions, and I won't let any affiliation change that. If you'd like to support us in a different way, consider checking out our merch at willhirsch.gay. We have the hoodie design I showed off earlier, along with a lot of other cool stuff for the upcoming cold months, such as these super comfy beanies. There are also limited edition things like this awesome embroidered tie-dye shirt, so if you like it, make sure to grab one before it's gone. As per usual, I wanted to extend a massive thank you to our wonderful Patreon supporters. Your support allows us to continue making these videos, and we appreciate every last one of you. These videos take a lot more effort to make than it seems, from writing scripts and shooting crazy B-roll sequences to spending weeks editing. So having the backing of all of you lovely people genuinely helps us keep going. I'd like to thank VIP patrons Baynort and Jima for their direct and substantial support of the channel. But that's pretty much it for the moment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna stop Brandon from fun-chuckifying everything in my house.
Like I said, you'll never stop us!